everybody, this is Maureen Wong for YourNextStamp.com. Today we're going to be making this super cute shaker card. Yes, it really does shake. And one of my little tips in there is that you don't need dies made specifically to make shaker cards, like frame dies, because you can make your own. I made this one out of a stitch rectangle and my Scrapworks flower die, and I'll show you a little tip on how you can use 2 dies and only run it through your machine once, and really easy to make your own, and then you can do any shape you want of frame rather than being limited to whatever the manufacturer thought was a cute frame. So let's get started. Okay, to start with, I'm using the stitch rectangle set, and I'm actually going to be using the largest one, which is my favorite. It's the perfect layering size for an A2 card. And then I've also got out my mini Scrapworks, Scrapworks mini sunburst die set. Sorry about that. And today I'm using the flower. I think that might be my favorite shape in the bunch. To make frames, I've heard people say, I don't want to run my die cut or run my piece through the die cut machine twice, because they think that you have to run your frame first, your outside first, and cut a piece and then run it with the inside piece. And you don't have to do that. And all it does is takes a little preparation, and you can run it through just one time. And so what I'm doing is I have it face down, and I've put my frame, let me get a little bit into the shot more. There we go. And I've positioned my Scrapworks die where I want it within the outside to make the frame. And I've got some wide blue painter's tape here. I think this is the, oh, I don't know where my ruler went, but I think this is like 1.5 inches or something like that. And I'm gonna tear off a piece, and I'm going to carefully stick it down to make sure that it is completely adhered to the rectangle and to the flower. And I'm working on my Ranger nonstick craft mat here. So then what we do is we just carefully peel this all up, and it's going to come up all together. And that is essentially your new frame die. And what you might want to do is, because you don't want to unsticky the tape before you put it on the dies, because then it might not stick well to the dies. But now at this point, you don't want it too sticky, because you're going to be sticking it to your foam. The foam doesn't matter as much because it's not going to rip apart when you take it off. But when I'm doing my pattern paper, I don't want it to be too sticky on those exposed parts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch my fingers, my hands to those open areas of tape. I can even, you can't see this, but I can stick it to my clothes and get a little bit of clothes lint on there, and then you can see right away it's not as tacky, but it will hold to your card. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have a piece of, I believe this is 3mm thick fun foam. This is actually the thicker fun foam or craft foam. The one people normally see, I think, all the time in the craft stores are the 2mm one, and that's fine too. What you can do with that is, if you're going to make a shaker card out of the 2mm foam, is either make sure the things that you put inside the shaker are really flat, or you can actually do 2 layers of that and bring it up to 4mm, and then you can put thicker things in, like seed beads. Or you can use this 3mm one, and it's just slightly thicker, and you can put slightly thicker things into your shaker and they'll still shake around. So I'm going to take my newly created frame, place it down on my craft foam, and then I'm going to stick that down and run it through my die cut machine. Okay, and I ran that through my die cut machine a couple times to make sure that the dies would be able to cut through that thicker fun foam. And in some places it didn't really cut through, but it made enough of an indent that I can pull the foam apart. Let me take this off of the die. And you want to remove this carefully because we're going to use this frame again. So I don't want the flower to move. We just peel that off. And you can see, even though I stuck it to my clothes, because I smashed it through that die cut machine a couple times, it really stuck down. So for my paper, I'm gonna be careful with that and make sure that I don't run it through multiple times, otherwise it's gonna stick to that too. So you can see right here, it's just a little connected, but I can just pull that apart. And from running it through a couple times, the die shifted just a little bit. This piece is gonna be hidden though, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But you want the general shape to be correct. So I can get rid of these extra foam pieces. And then I'm going to pick a paper to be my front cover of my shaker card. And I'm using Lawn Fawn's Hello Sunshine 6x6 paper pad, and I've picked this one with the miscellaneous borders across of it. And what I'm gonna do is take my frame again, and I figured out where I want this to be is down at the bottom corner. So I'm gonna line that up carefully and then stick that down. And like I said, I don't want to stick it down too hard because I don't want it to tear up the paper when I take it off. So once again, I'm going to go and run this through my die cut machine. Okay, so here is my die cut piece, and this time what we're going to do is I'm going to be more careful to not bend the paper. We've already cut our foam piece and our front piece, so we don't need this configuration of frame anymore. So what I'm going to do is peel the tape off of everything at the same time so I'm not bending my paper. I'm going to make sure my paper is flat on the table and then peel off the painter's tape. And it shouldn't be too sticky. And if you're worried about it once it goes through the foam layer and it didn't come up very well, you can go ahead and stick it to your clothes again, like just stick it to your shirt. And it may seem like it's not gonna stick at all, but it will. And especially when you run it through the die cut machine, it smashes it down and it tends to stick even better. So I'm just gonna put that up there, and then you can see that I've got a frame. And it matches my foam perfectly because I used the exact same dies to cut them both out. So now what I'm going to do is I need backing for this. I'm going to make this separate from my card base and then stick it to my card base. So what I went ahead and did was I took that same rectangle, stitch rectangle frame, and I cut a piece of plain white cardstock for the backing. And then what I'm going to want is something in that window. So I'm going to look what I want in that window, and I'm testing, let's see if this rainbow pattern works, and that kind of gets a little bit lost. How about this pink one? That looks really cute. So I'm going to use this pink bee paper, and I'm not going to cut, oh, that got stuck in there. I'm not going to cut out my paper with the die because I don't want it exactly the same size. I want it just a little bit larger. So I'm going to use the die to just hand cut around this, and then I will have a piece that goes behind my foam like that, but it's not exactly the same size in case you see some little white edges or something. It's just better to be safe than sorry. So that is going to be my shaker card. All I need is a piece of plastic or acetate for this, and then I'm going to do a little bit of decorating. So let me get to that. Okay, now I'm going to assemble the shaker card. So if you're new to making shaker cards, hopefully this will help you. If you already know how to make shaker cards, then you can skip this part of the video. So what I have first is my background, and I'm going to adhere my pink piece of pattern paper. And I'm gonna, whoops, that just slid right down. I'm gonna want to adhere it behind my flower cutout. So what I'm gonna do is place the pink piece behind the flower cutout and then line this up. And there, I've got perfect placement. It's crooked, but it doesn't matter as long as it completely fills that area. Then what I'm going to use for the fun foam, and sorry it's all dirty, but that's actually why I'm using it for this project, because the only thing that shows in the fun foam is the sides, and those are clean. So what I'm going to use for this part is tacky glue, and I'm going to make sure to put a layer all around the opening so that my shaker items don't fall out. And then I'm also going to put a layer all around the edge to make sure it holds on. And some extra in this open area just to be sure. So now I'm going to carefully place this piece exactly lined up with that backer piece, because it is the same die, so it should fit exactly on top. And I'm going to push down to make sure that glue adheres. And there's just a little bit of glue that squeezed out the sides, but that should be okay. And then what I'm going to do is let that dry for a little while. I want the glue to be dried when I add my things in, otherwise they might tend to go underneath a little bit and stick to the glue. So I'm just going to lay that on the side. And then for my acetate, what I'm going to do is just use my ATG gun and go all the way around that opening. And it doesn't have to be exact, because it just doesn't. So I'm going to go ahead and place that onto my acetate, and then I'm going to wait for this to dry, like I said, and then I will be back when it's all nice and dry. Okay, so while I'm waiting for my shaker back to dry, I'm going to go ahead and stamp some of the, or two little birds, and I'm using the Word Critter Spring Bird set. Let me show you a better view of that. It's got a couple of sentiments and then all these cute little bird images, and then there's a rose and a branch. And the great thing about this is it comes with a matching die set, which I just love. You must know that by now. So I've picked two of the birds to stamp, so I'm gonna just put them on my piece of scrap cardstock here, and I'm spreading them out a little bit so that I can actually run my die through at the same time. The dies through at the same time, but I'm just gonna stamp this first with my Misty in Memento Tuxedo Black ink, like I usually do, and then I'm gonna go ahead and color with Spectrum Noir colored pencils, and I can remove this from my Misty and set this aside, and then color these. And I'm not going to be doing a really good job coloring because, oh, let me just, yeah, that's a good color. Because these are so small, it's, I guess, not important enough to me to take a really long time coloring this, so I'm gonna try and do a quick coloring job here. And I need something lighter. There we go. Oh, sorry, why don't I zoom in and then you can actually see what I'm doing because it's such a tiny little image. So you can see I used the image of the bird flying with the heart on its tummy. I think this one is just so adorable. And in case you haven't noticed, I am using my Spectrum Noirs again because they're sitting on my table. I am waiting for a storage system for all my pencils. I have a bunch of different pencils and I want to be able to store them all together on my desk, so I'm waiting for that storage system to come around. And by the way, I'm using 65 for the lighter blue and the darker blue is 68. And I'm going to color them both with these two blues. Let me see, am I in frame? There we go. So you can see I'm not doing a very good job coloring. I am putting a little bit of shading and shadowing in there, but not a whole lot. And I'm not doing multiple layers, I'm just pressing right down and getting it done on the first layer. And then I need a red for the heart, and this is 25. And then I need an orange for the beaks, and I'm gonna go with, let's see if I like this one, 20. Number 20 for the beaks. And they are done. So now I'm gonna take the matching dies and line them up. Oops, sorry about that. And then I'm gonna stick them down with some painter's tape that is really not too sticky. And I'm gonna get the other one and line that up too. Sorry, my big fingers are in the way, but these are really little. And stick that down and run it through my die cut machine. Okay, and here are my two birds, and my tape is pulling up a little bit of my cardstock. You know, when you pull the tape from the edges, it tends to want to bring up the cardstock from the edges like that. So if you pull from the inside, it doesn't tend to do that as much. So that's a little tip, and I should remember that too. But I'm just going to pop my little birds out. There's one. And let's see if I can get this one out. Here's the other one. Aren't they just adorable? So those are my two birds that I'm going to be using on my card. And then I'm also going to check my card to see if it's dry, and it seems dry enough. So what I'm gonna do now is zoom out. Sorry about that. And I'm gonna fill in my shaker portion with what I want. So what I have here is a Craft Mates Lockables. I think I bought these in a set of 2 or 4 from the craft store, and these sequins aren't from any fancy company, they're just Derice from the craft store. I do have some company sequins, but for today I just wanted to use these simple ones. And actually I made a shaker a while back, and I made this mix with a little bit of some confetti glitter and the 2 different kinds of sequins, and I ended up not using it for my other project, so I'm going to use it for this project, and that's really nice. And then what I also have is a little mix of seed beads and little mini bugle beads, and the reason why I like to put seed beads in my shaker cards is they shake really, really well. This one looks like it's too big. So I'm going to get all my shaker items back inside. Then I'm going to get my tacky glue again and make sure I have a layer of tacky all over to make sure I keep all my shaker items inside of my shaker area. And then again around the edges. And a little bit extra just to be sure. And then I'm going to carefully line up my front panel. And the way to do this is not with the edges, because there may be something, the foam sometimes tends to warp when you run it through. That's why this edge is a little warped, but the paper doesn't warp. So what I'm going to do is line up the opening, the flower openings, to make sure that it is positioned nicely, because that's really the most important part of the shaker, is the shaker opening where the things are. So I lined that up to make sure that I have a nice shaker. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little birdies and I'm going to get some tiny little foam dots and stick them on my card. And so this one is looking down in the shaker, and this one is like she's flying up into the shaker. So there we go. We have our 2 little birds. Can you see that okay? I always go the wrong way with my zooming. There are my 2 little birdies. And I'm not going to shake this yet. Like I said before, you want to let it dry so that the pieces don't get stuck to wet glue. So that is my card for now. And I'm not going to put a sentiment on it because it says, "Oh, happy day" and "Hello, sunshine" down here. And I think that's enough. And I don't want to take away anything from this really cute pattern paper that I used. So I'm just going to leave that. The last thing I need to do, though, is get my A2 card base and adhere this down. But I'm going to let this dry first before I do that, because I don't want to turn this upside down while the glue is still wet. Okay, so the final step is adhering our shaker element to our A2 card base. I am using paper tray ink cardstock for this because it's really heavy weight, and it supports the weight of the shaker really well, so that's why I'm using that. And I am just going to use my ATG gun. Remember, this back panel is just cardstock, so we're just sticking cardstock to cardstock, and it should hold just fine with the ATG. I'm going to add just a little bit of extra in the middle. And then my tip about opening your card so you don't adhere stuff upside down. And then I'm going to go ahead and center this on my A2 card base. And there is my shaker. Ooh, glare. Sorry about the glare. But you can see and hear how well it shakes because of those beads, and also the sequins shake pretty nicely too. But there you go, that's your finished shaker. So I hope you enjoyed this project, and thank you very much for watching.